Welcome to a deep dive. Today we're looking at a really fascinating academic analysis of the Book of Genesis.
Yeah, it's called the harmonic gnosis, a scalar cosmological analysis of the Book of Genesis. Quite a title.
It is. And it takes Genesis and looks at it through a totally different lens, not as, linear history or straightforward theology.
Right, it sees it as a recursive harmonic architecture, even a waveform cosmology.
Exactly, like reality building itself through energy patterns described in the text. So our mission here is to pull out the key insights using the paper's own terms, things like scalar, torsion, collapse, reseeding.
And we'll unpack what those mean in the specific context.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting right off the bat is how it interprets phrases like, let there be.
Not just commands.
No, it calls them scalar activation. The whole analysis treats the text as what it calls a gnosis-bearing system.
Meaning it holds some kind of inherent knowledge.
Exactly. Knowledge about these fundamental scalar dynamics, these sort of energetic principles.
Okay, let's unpack that. So the paper treats Genesis itself as an X-field emission point.
Or a fractal breath seed.
A breath seed. So creation isn't first about physical stuff.
Not initially, no. It's framed as scalar issuance via breath, like pure potential information emerging from a source.
Wow. And the days of creation. Not literal days then.
Not 24-hour days, no. More like rotational harmonic phases. Think of them as stages, maybe cycles, where structure starts to form out of that potential.
Structure from potential, described as X issuance into space. What are X and psi here?
Good question. Think of X as the pure source potential, like undifferentiated energy or information. And inside, that's the structured reality that emerges from it, the manifest world.
Got it. So let there be is a scalar collapse operator. What does that mean?
It means it's like the action that takes that wave of potential, the X seed, and sort of focuses it, collapses it into a specific form within that size structure, within manifest reality.
Okay. And naming things. It's not just labeling.
No, the paper calls it scalar vector binding.
Binding. How so?
Well, it suggests naming is active. It sort of fixes or binds these energy vectors, helping define and stabilize that structure, this structure as it emerges, gives it shape in the field.
Right. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Eden.
Ah, yes. Eden.
And not a place on a map in this view.
Not at all. It's described as a non-torsion harmonic basin, basically a stabilized field.
Okay, non-torsion. Torsion means what? Conflict, distortion.
Yeah, exactly. Resistance, friction, conflict within the energy field. So Eden is this state of perfect harmony. The breath flows without contradiction. Naming reinforces the source connection. It doesn't break it.
A phase-locked gnosis chamber.
Yeah.
So the knowledge is perfectly integrated there. And the two trees.
Right. The tree of life is the x-axis, that direct line back to the source potential upward recursion.
And the tree of knowledge.
That's the axis. It represents expansion, but also the potential for, torsion, polarity, getting caught up in the manifest world.
And eating from it kicks off SE's inflation.
Yes, an overexpansion into that structured world.
Yeah.
And the paper links that inflation
to the emergence of ego.
Precisely. Focusing too much on the separate structure, losing the connection to the source, the great separation begins. And the Supin introduces portion logic.
The logic of doubt, separation.
Conflict, yeah. It distorts the field.
Which triggers a torsion spiral. The field fragments.
It does. It breaks down. And Cain killing Abel, in this view, is the first polar collapse.
A collapse between polar opposites.
Kind of. A destructive conflict within that now fragmented field. A killing of scalar mirrors, driven by that torsion, that jealousy.
And as it fragments, things get less coherent. Decoherence.
Yes, it accelerates, the structure degrades. Then you get the Nephilim story, which they interpret as cross-domain breaches.
Like different parts of the broken field interfering with each other.
Something like that. Dimensional torsion, causing more dissonance.
Which brings us to the flood. Not just punishment, then.
Not solely, no. More like a scalar correction. A necessary reset, a harmonic wipe and phase reinitialization to stop total decoherence.
And Noah is the X-seed capsule.
He carries the potential, the source connection through the reset.
Okay, jumping ahead. The Tower of Babel. Not just about architecture or pride.
In this model, it's a crisis in scalar linguistics.
Scalar linguistics. What happened to language?
Well, the idea is language was originally a unified stream aligned to X-source, a way to channel that gnosis, but it became torsion tech.
A tool for separation, linear thinking.
Exactly. Used for accumulation, power within the fragmented field, rather than connection to the source.
Leading to the collapse of unified breath, the confusion of tongues.
Which the paper calls phase scattering, the multiplication of vectors.
So language stops carrying that deep knowledge, becomes just a tool.
Yeah. Used for navigating the fragmented world. But the scattering is also seen as kind of protective.
Protective.
By fragmenting language, it perhaps prevented the complete corruption of the source connection by this torsion logic.
Okay, so after Babel, Abraham comes into focus.
Yes. He's positioned as a harmonic attractor, someone able to receive a reseeded X vector, a fresh infusion of that source potential.
And the covenant with him, not just a deal.
More like a scalar tether, designed to stabilize a specific lineage, a collineage, to carry that encoded gnosis, that X seed, forward.
A recursive gnosis carrier, so things like his name change, Abram to Abraham.
Seen as X-phase augmentation, adding the H encodes breath expansion, reconnecting the source into his identity.
And the lineage, Isaac, Jacob, the tribes, they become amplification nodes.
Points in the field meant to carry and, well, amplify that reseeded potential. So Genesis ends not back in Edenic perfection, but
when a seeded nation heading into darkness, into Egypt.
Right. And the paper suggests that reflects recursion. The seed has to be buried in darkness to grow again. The source breathes once, and the echo spirals outward.
So the covenant isn't just history. It's like a scalar waveform. Yeah. Echoing that breath generation to generation.
Waiting for the next phase collapse, the next major activation, like Sinai maybe, or the Messiah.
Wow. That is a lot to think about. It really reframes Genesis as field structure in story form, not just myth.
Yeah, it suggests the gnosis, the deep knowledge, is encoded in breath, folded in torsion, awaiting activation. It's still there, in the structure.
So here's a provocative thought then, for you listening. If this perspective holds any water, if reality is shaped by this kind of spoken recursion, and naming things really is scalar vector binding, how might your own breath, your words, your intentions, and the names or definitions you apply to things, how might that be shaping the structure, the reality right around you?
What kind of resonance are you putting out there? What are you binding into form?